Come on in, bestie. Welcome to Story Pod, where we do the doing of story development together. Brought to you by Creative BFF. Hello, I'm so happy to be with you again today. Listen, we've got one of my faves. Okay, we've got a story snack where I answer a little question, a little story-based question. It is coming from Reddit today, which you will see when I read the question. If you would like to send me a question, please feel free. I would love to answer one of your questions. You can do so at ash@creativebff.com. Girl, I almost forgot my email address, ash@creativebff.com. Or you can go to my website, creativebff.com, and go to the contact section and send me a message. Please reference that it is a story question in the subscribe, not in the subscribe, in the subject. Girl, where are my words? In the subject, please reference that it's a story question, because I have to filter, because you know we get all this spam. And before we jump into the question, I do have a disclaimer. You may or may not be used to these right now, okay? Because I recorded a bunch of episodes in a space that was not soundproof. Not that my normal recording space is particularly soundproof, but it is better. So it's gonna sound a little echoey. It might sound a little janky. But listen, I love you, you love me, we're best friends, and what is a little bit of echo between best friends, right? So please be gentle, be patient with me as I get my life together for this podcast, and I hope that you will still be able to enjoy the content. So let's get right to it. So the question is from the r/character development subreddit. The poster is Noob Witcher. The question is, saving humanity, better to send an adult savior or a growing child with powers? In my story, humanity is on the brink of destruction due to severe droughts and floods. Almost 95% of humans have been banished from the surface of the earth, and the remaining survivors are confined to a single island where resources are scarce, and some have even started to turn to cannibalism. In this dire situation, God decides to send someone to save humanity. I'm debating between two approaches and would love your input. 1, send an adult. This person would already have all the necessary powers and knowledge to stop the impending doom. 2, send a baby. This child would grow up, gradually realizing their powers and destiny, eventually stepping up to save humanity. Which approach do you think makes for a more compelling and engaging story? An adult who can act immediately with full power and knowledge, or a child who grows into their role, allowing for character development and gradual revelation of their abilities? Okay, so to my thinking, in my mind, I think the answer to this question, and I don't think there's like necessarily a right answer. I don't even know if I would say there's a best answer. I think it really depends on the focus of the story that you want to focus on. What do you want to focus on? So if you're sending a baby, a lot of the story is going to be, obviously, as was mentioned, the gradual growth and development of this child into the savior of this world. And I do think that can be a very interesting an interesting story to follow. The hero's journey is very clear in that case. This child would have a lot to learn, even if it wasn't a baby, but it was a young child who, just learns about their, what they are supposed to do. Basically just the same thing, but child or baby. And that, to me, is going to potentially necessitate maybe a longer story because there's more information to get through, and the focus will be very heavily, I believe. Now, of course, this is just off the top of the dome for me, and there's always many ways that the story can be told. You can do a time jump to show a little bit of their life as a child and then jump to them being an adult. And also it depends on the logic of the world that you set up, the powers and the abilities, society, the world building, all of that will have a hand in how quickly the story moves. But there will be a lot of work to get through, basically, for this kid and for whoever you set up as supporting characters, as mentors and guides and things like that, unless you're doing a story where this child is just isolated and learning on their own, which I wouldn't suggest doing that, because people don't learn in a vacuum. You need other people to help you grow and understand the world. Now, sending an adult is a totally different, especially if this adult already has and knows about the powers. They know pretty much exactly what to do, and if not exactly what to do, they at least know that they'll be able to do it when they figure it out. That is, I think, a different focus, because there's a big chunk of development and growth that is taken out. So you'll need to find other ways for this character to grow, unless this character, the savior, is not the main character of the story, unless you have some other people who are the main characters of the story, who maybe are going on the journey to find this savior. But if you do want to follow the savior, the adult savior, as the main character of the story, then what is going to be their character arc? Excuse me. How are they going to grow? How are they going to change? While I don't think it's impossible, I think it's very difficult to write a perfect main character, which I've had that challenge in some of my own stories, perhaps depicting God or something like that. Is like, how do you write an interesting character who doesn't have any flaws? If we're not taking, a God from another mythology, like Greek mythology or Egyptian or Roman, where the gods, quote unquote, that you see there are very human-like. They're kind of like human with powers. They're messy, they're petty, they're kind of not good people necessarily all the time. And even the ones who are good are still very kind of human, But if you're taking a character or a deity like the Judeo-Christian God, Jesus, something like that, how do you show a character development for a character who's already perfect? So that'll be, you need to decide, okay, what type of savior is this? Is this just a human person who has been endowed with abilities by God in order to save this world? Or is this actually God coming to save? And I think doing directly God would be very, very difficult to write an interesting main character. Now, if you're doing a flawed, fallible human who does have the powers, but they have weaknesses and flaws that get in the way of them just being able to snap their finger and now the world is healed, now everything's okay, they get in their own way. Of course, I'm sure that there would be an antagonist of some sort, if not an actual character. Perhaps the antagonist would be something of a time clock, like you have to get to this certain place or achieve this certain goal by a certain time, or the world is over. So you would have to put obstacles in their way that aren't just so easy to get rid of with a snap of the finger, even though they have the powers. And then you think about your supporting cast that comes in and adds richness and perhaps complication as well. who's going on the journey with them? Do they want people to go on the journey with them? Is part of their growth as a character going from being very solitary, being very duty oriented, having known for many years, if not all their life, that this is what they were made for, this is why they're here, if they already know what they're supposed to do. And so their view is, I'm just going to go and do the thing, and they don't want anybody to get in the way of that, even if they are allies. But then they find out that maybe they can't do it all on their own for whatever reason. They have allies. I mean, even Jesus had his 12 bros, right? And I'm not saying that Jesus would necessarily need them to accomplish what he was here to do, but he still had his 12 bros who went with him on this journey, right? And part of that was probably because they were going to carry on the journey after he was gone. So that might be an interesting direction to take, looking at source material like the Bible or another source, whatever you're drawing inspiration from, or if you're creating your own thing, So those would be the considerations that I would have going into it. And it really depends on your goal for the story and the theme that you want to show the audience. What is the most interesting thing in your story that you want to show? Is it the journey of going from zero to hero? Is it the journey of hero to, realizing that you are not a perfect hero and you do need people? And there's a million other potential journeys in there, because this adult could still have the same issue as the baby, where they didn't necessarily have the powers before. I mean, okay, we want them to have the knowledge and powers and things like that to stop the impending doom, but there is still some type of journey that they need to go on to make it interesting. There does still need to be conflict, challenges, character arc, and character growth. And if there's not going to be a change, there's not going to be a character arc for the savior character, then in my estimation, my view as both a writer and an avid consumer of story, a lover of story, in my view, if there's not going to be any change or any growth or any character arc for the savior character, then I do think that perhaps the savior character is maybe not the main character, and we have other flawed characters that do go through a character arc, because in general, those are more interesting characters to follow. It's just more fun and more intriguing to see how a flawed character solves the world issue, achieves the goal, or if it's a tragedy, fails ultimately at the goal. And it might even be interesting if you come at it from a different perspective, is if it's a group of characters who go on this journey to find this particular savior, and all of the hopes of humanity are in this particular savior. Perhaps they find this savior, and then it turns out that either the savior isn't who they think who the characters think that the savior would be, or the savior actually fails. And so now it's like, okay, now we have to solve this problem. And again, it depends on what story you're trying to tell. If you're coming from it, because you do mention God sends a savior, so it does maybe seem like potentially you're coming at it as like a Christian allegory, maybe. I don't know for sure. There are, there's a million other, it's always a million, right? There's 3,800 all other possibilities for where you're drawing inspiration for this and what you're wanting to tell. But if it is a Christian allegory, there might be a little bit of an issue with you setting up a savior. If the savior is supposed to be like Jesus, that fails ultimately. maybe that'll be a moral issue for yourself and, you know, the story that you're trying to tell. But in any case, if that's not the case, well, then have at it, you know? So that would be my answer to this. In a nutshell, it depends on what type of story you want to tell, where the focus is that you want, well, where you want the story focus to be, how you want to tell the hero's journey, and if you're able to or planning to give the savior character any flaws, weaknesses, issues that they have to overcome, even though they have this amazing ability to save the world. So, bestie, dear audience members, what do you think? How would you solve the problem? What's your opinion about which one of these options would be an interesting read for you? Because this is just my opinion, but what's yours? I want to know, and maybe I'll change my opinion based on your opinion.